silent, ravaged ruins of a 1,000-year-old fort survey the tiny Indian village of Chittorgraph. When it was overrun by invading armies 400 years ago, Gadia Lohar tribesmen left the fort, vowing never to return until it was free. Today, 4,000 descendants of the liberty-loving Lohars are marching back. Led by Premier Nehru, they are ending 4 centuries of ceaseless wandering and self-imposed exile. Scattered across India, they were reunited by the government. Passing through the arch into the sprawling 3-mile square grounds, the Lohars come with the assurance that, like India, their fort is free. Oriental music plays a native background for the return of the nomadic Lohars. A day of achievement for Nehru, a moment of homecoming for a proud people. Ships of the United States 7th Fleet cruise the South China Sea off Formosa, ever alert for an attack on the nationalist China stronghold. Mail and crewmen are transferred from ship to ship without stopping, nor do the lean gray ships of the fleet stop because of heavy seas. Refueling and fresh supplies keep the ships at sea indefinitely so that planes, armed and ready, can be sent on regular patrol missions. Ranging far over the horizon, the planes probe for red Chinese forces. They are ready to send the fleet into action if the attack that the United States is pledged to resist comes against Formosa. The Navy reveals the closest thing yet to a flying saucer. It's called the flying platform. Safety lines keep it close to the ground as the pilot demonstrates how he steers, merely by shifting his weight in the direction he wants to go. Still in research, it may become a jumping jeep for short hops. 2 small engines drive 2 propellers rotating in opposite directions underneath the flying platform. Taking off in untethered flight, it rises on the blast of air sucked in through holes in the top of the platform and driven down by the propeller thrust. At Palo Alto, California, the flying platform hovers a few feet from the earth, but the Navy says extensive testing at low altitudes is necessary before altitude or long-distance flights are tried in any form on the flying platform.
Across America, millions hailed the glorious resurrection of Christ. The rising sun casts a benediction on 25,000 persons at dawn in California's Hollywood Bowl. Near the nation's capital, other thousands attend the sunrise service at Arlington National Cemetery. Together they recite the Apostles' Creed, I believe in God. In New York, the weather sparkles on a record crowd jamming 5th Avenue in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral. An estimated 2 million persons take part in the traditional Easter parade on the day of hope and joy for all mankind.
Long Beach, California, a centuries-old sport, badminton, wins new converts at the national championships. In the doubles final, newly crowned singles champion Joe Alston in far court teams with Win Rogers, another American, against Malaya's Eddie Chung and Darrell Thompson of the United States. Faster even than tennis, badminton finds the players lunging and twisting to make returns. The crowd is busy too, following the lightning volleys. Keeping the eccentric shuttlecock in flight and in court takes a master's touch. Now, Rogers serving on match point. Watch the brilliant exchange. Alston puts it away, and the doubles crown and cup goes to Joe Alston and Win Rogers. Group captain Peter Townsend, leading contender in the Princess Margaret sweepstakes, and 5,000 curious fans turn up for a gentleman riders race in Paris. While Townsend weighs in, youthful admirers invade his dressing room. they discover a hole in one of the socks of the man who may someday wed Queen Elizabeth's sister. Margaret's beau is Nimrod, a heavy favorite with the fans. But when the field breaks from the starting wire, Nimrod and Townsend are away last, trailing badly into the first turn. Down the home stretch, however, Nimrod snatches the lead and wins by a nose in a driving finish. This day in a thoroughbred sweepstakes, victory belongs to Peter Townsend. In Washington, 27,000 baseball fans, led by President Eisenhower, the nation's #1 rooter, attend the season's opener. Washington's new manager is Charlie Dressen, a two-time pennant winner with Brooklyn. Leading the opposing Orioles is Paul Richards, former White Sox skipper. Bothered by bursitis, Ike's play ball toss is in the dirt, touching off a scramble among the Washington and Baltimore players. Retrieving the errant throw, Pete Runnels, the Senator's second baseman, has his coveted catch autographed by the president, a star outfielder in his high school days. Getting down to the diamond doings, the Senators take the field, and soon the crack of bat on horsehide rings through the park. Baseball is back.
The Missouri River overflows in the worst floods in its history, rampaging through 9 Midwest states and driving from their homes 75,000 persons. Bulldozers shore up the banks of the swollen river, and temporary dikes are built with sandbags in an effort to control the raging waters. Here in Sioux City, Iowa, is the crest of the flood. But for 600 miles of the river's length, the banks are dotted with ghost towns, abandoned by residents. From one ghost town, South Sioux City, Nebraska, supplies and people are evacuated. These residents board one of the last trains. Shortly after these scenes were filmed, the railroad bridge over which we pass was declared unsafe. But miraculously, not one life has been lost in this greatest of Missouri River disasters.
In Paris, General Eisenhower announces his resignation as NATO commander and states his plans should he be nominated for the presidency.
I have forwarded a request that I be relieved from my current military assignment and placed on inactive status. If, however, I should, because of the current effort, be nominated this July to political office, I shall promptly submit to the President my resignation as an officer of the Army. From that point on, I would be as free to act and speak as any other citizen, without any of the limitations imposed by the traditions of the military establishment. Personalities and partisan viewpoints come and go in all our countries. But the values we of SHAPE have been called upon to defend are those that man has struggled toward since history began. Security, peace, liberty. These are the watchwords by which we live at SHAPE. They represent the aspirations of all men who revere the free institutions of our civilization.
In Rome, Pope Pius XII speaks from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to 250,000 people as he gives his Easter address to the world. The Pope calls upon clergy and lay people to bring the word of Christ into factories, offices, and fields in an apostolic crusade. Then, speaking in Latin, Pope Pius bestows his blessing.
Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos.
Hundreds of Americans are among the worshipers who have come from all over the world to celebrate Easter at St. Peter's with the Pope. In Washington, President Truman honors 3 servicemen for heroism in Korea. The Medal of Honor goes to Lieutenant Lloyd L. Burke, who grenaded 3 enemy bunkers, then carrying a machine gun wiped out 100 more Reds when his company was pinned down. Bradley sees Corporal Rodolfo P. Hernandez receive the same award for attacking an onrushing enemy force, though wounded and alone, and killing 6 with his bayonet after running out of ammunition. Marine Sergeant Harold E. Wilson also receives the Medal of Honor for rallying and rescuing his men, though seriously wounded, when their post was overrun by the enemy. Then Mr. Truman congratulates the gallant winners of America's highest honor. In Washington, Easter's traditional egg hunts bring out some funny bunnies to thrill the youngsters of the capital's Crippled Children's Society. Why, it's Abbott and Costello. One little girl doesn't know if she likes Lou any better than the rabbit. Lou's feeling mighty frisky after completing his latest picture with Bud Abbott, Warner Brothers' color version of Jack and the Beanstalk. These Easter eggs are hard-boiled, and Juggler Lou is about to discover just how hard-boiled they are. In Indochina, communist positions take a hammering. General de Linares, French theater commander, inspects the front as napalm bombs blast red entrenchments. French and anti-communist native forces are once again taking the initiative after a series of deep infiltrations by the enemy. Now, in operations carried out mainly in muddy rice paddies, the red pockets of infiltration are being wiped out. Nearly 5,000 prisoners have been taken in the past month of fighting in this 6-year, $3 million a day war. As in all modern war, the most pathetic victims are the civilians, the homeless, like this old man who greets us politely before passing on in the flight from communist terrorism.
At Daytona Beach, Florida, the National AAU Senior Women's Diving and Swimming Championships are underway. In the 100-yard breaststroke, they're splashing along at a clip that might produce a new record. And a new AAU mark is racked up by 22-year-old Gail Peters of Trenton, New Jersey. They're all set for the 100-yard freestyle, and in they go. 22-year-old Jackie Levine of Chicago is the defending champ in this event. As they churn into the finish, Jackie's in front again for a second AAU victory in 2 years and still another speed record. Then the fans' attention is focused on the 3-meter diving with 17-year-old Paula Myers doing a 1.5 pike in a challenge for the title. But Mrs. Pat McCormick, a Los Angeles housewife, executes a faultless dive to triumph for the 2nd straight year.
With Asiatic pomp, the new United States ambassador to India takes his post. Ambassador John Sherman Cooper in top hat arrives at the president's house in New Delhi. Indian officials escort the American diplomat. Colorfully uniformed guards herald the arrival of a procession with India's president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, in the rear. The former Kentucky senator presents his credentials. John Sherman Cooper becomes America's ambassador to India. Austin, Texas holds the world premiere of Warner Brothers' film, Strange Lady in Town. Greer Garson and Dana Andrews are the stars of the film about a woman physician in a western town. Director Mervyn Leroy joins the CinemaScope Technicolor premiere. Austin is ablaze with lights, and the city has given its biggest Texas welcome to the Hollywood contingent. Premiere events included a speech by Greer to the Texas legislature. And in Austin, no strange lady is she at the world premiere of Warner Brothers' Strange Lady in Town. Two wartime comrades meet in Charleston, where the president and General Mark Clark conduct a snappy cadet inspection. Ike is visiting the Citadel, South Carolina's military college. Former Governor Burns is on hand for a handshake. Before the gray-clad cadets, the president receives an honorary degree from his friend, General Clark, the Citadel's president. Taut lines of cadets sweep by in review. Military men, says the president, should be apostles of peace and learn to know the heart of America.
This is polio, the cruel, centuries-old crippler of children. Enlarged 77,000 times, these actual polio viruses are less than 1/1,000,000th of an inch in diameter. Now to Michigan University campus in Ann Arbor come hundreds of scientists, hoping to hear the words that will signal the end of polio's long and ruthless reign of terror. Leading the medical men is Dr. Jonas Salk, whose polio vaccine has been tested and evaluated. Copies of the official findings are wheeled in as Salk chats with his family on what is to be his day of magnificent achievement. Reporters press forward to get the results the whole world is waiting for, rushing to typewriters to spread the momentous news. Inside the meeting hall, Dr. Salk and Dr. Thomas Francis, director of the year-long study, mark time awaiting the arrival of their copy of the report. The room is electric with expectancy. Then the dramatic announcement. The vaccine works. It is safe, effective, and potent. The tests prove it up to 90% effective in preventing paralytic polio. Dr. Salk, this figure was based on last year's vaccine. Can we hope for still greater improvement in the future?
I think there's little question about that. You must remember that this study was something that was undertaken about a year ago, based upon plans and upon vaccines that were begun in preparation more than a year and a half ago. In the course of the subsequent period of time, we've learned a great deal more, not only about preparation of vaccine, but about use of vaccine.
Working at the University of Pittsburgh's Virus Research Laboratory, the 40-year-old Dr. Salk labored 3 years, often 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, to painstakingly perfect the vaccine before its mass testing. The cherry red serum contains polio virus, which, although killed, still has the power to stimulate the body into producing millions of protective antibodies in the bloodstream, building a wall between children and paralytic polio. Early production of the vaccine was difficult, limiting last year's experiment. Even so, it was the largest such medical test ever attempted. 440,000 youngsters in 44 states were inoculated with the Salk vaccine. 210,000 received dummy shots, and more than 1 million other children were observed as a comparison. Not a single child who completed the Salk vaccinations died of paralytic polio. Already in full-scale manufacture, laboratories have turned out enough of the precious serum for 30 million and possibly 45 million children this year. Dr. Jonas Salk and science have enriched mankind with one of its greatest gifts, victory over the age-old scourge of polio. And now, Dr. Salk, with the report completed, what are your own present personal plans?
To think about it.
Kansas City puts on a big league welcome for its brand new big league team, the Athletics. Upwards of 200,000 persons turn out for the parade. Today, baseball is king. Even Hoppy is on hand, drawing dead aim on the A's rivals. Few in the crowd can remember when Kansas City was in the National League in 1889 and the American League in 1900. 33,000 present-day fans fill Municipal Stadium to see Harry Truman, one-time Washington southpaw, show that his high hard one still has plenty of zip as Kansas City becomes the westernmost outpost of Major League Baseball. 8,000 fans jam the Oakland Auditorium for the action-packed All-Navy Boxing Championships. In the light middleweight finals, Frank Anderson is decked, but fast. Following up his advantage, Rudy Sawyer chases the dazed Anderson. And in the roughhouse action, Sawyer wrestles him to the canvas. Like a yo-yo, Anderson's down again, up again, still game. But when the spunky sailor is dropped a fourth time, Sawyer sews up the service crown. Moving up to the light heavyweights, Charlie Butler in light trunks and Antoine Bergeau mix it in a slam-bang scrap. Battling it out at close range, both belters look for a chance to explode their KO wallops. Now watch Butler draw a bead for his sledgehammer left. Bombs away. Bye-bye, Bergeau.
Washington, 3,500 Democrats filled the National Guard Armory to honor 73-year-old Sam Rayburn, Speaker of the House for longer than any other man in American history. Former President Truman, Senator George, and Adlai Stevenson head the party faithful present. Also attending are Mrs. Truman, Mrs. Woodrow Wilson, and another former First Lady, Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, with Alvin Barkley. Senate leaders past and present, Connally of Texas, Lehman of New York, Kefauver of Tennessee, joined Dean Acheson, former Secretary of State, in saluting Sam Rayburn on a memorable congressional career. Chancellor Julius Raab returns to Vienna after winning apparent Russian agreement on the long stalemated Austrian peace treaty. During the Moscow conferences, the Red leaders promised to withdraw Soviet occupation forces if United States, British, and French soldiers also leave, and Austria becomes a unified but neutral and disarmed nation. Such an agreement would mark the first Russian troop withdrawal in Europe since World War II. Jubilant crowds cheer the Chancellor's car, hoping the settlement will end 17 years of occupation that began with Hitler's Anschluss in '38. Western diplomats are wary, however, as Austria looks toward freedom. In Japan, labor troubles plagued the Osaka Stock Exchange, with pro-management employees forming a flying wedge to crash through a picket line and force their way into the exchange building. Outnumbered 10 to 1, the 50 strikers struggle stubbornly to bar the door. Finally, they are swept aside in the push for the entrance. Bystanders watch amazed as a victorious invader commandeers a window ledge. Attempting to carry on normal operations, the market is thrown into turmoil as pickets wearing headbands jam the floor, touching off new disorders. Activities are suspended as men, not stocks, go tumbling in the Osaka Exchange.
Admiral Felix Stump, Pacific Commander, reports to President Eisenhower on the Far East at Augusta National Golf Club in Georgia, where the President is mixing work and sport. Out with his foursome, the President is teamed with Dr. Carey Middlecoff, Masters Tournament winner. Bursitis of the shoulder doesn't cramp the presidential form, but it doesn't help the presidential score, unofficially reported in the 80s. Officially, no comment. Egypt's Premier Nasser pays his first visit to India, and New Delhi's airport echoes to shouts of Zindabad, long live Nehru and Nasser. An honor escort of officials is provided for Nasser. He's against regional defense pacts. His visit is to strengthen friendship between India and Egypt, says Premier Nasser. Dr. Albert Einstein came to America with his wife to escape Nazi persecution. His mathematical wizardry led to the atomic age. He received highest honors, but lived quietly at Princeton, New Jersey. There, death came to Albert Einstein. He was 76. The April in Paris Ball and Fashion Show is held at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, a top-draw event for international society. Gowns are specially designed for the ball by Paris houses: Balenciaga, Pierre Balmain, Castillo Lanvin, Jean Dessay, Christian Dior, Bath, de Givenchy, and Gray. Society leaders and stars of the entertainment world wear the dresses. The show is for the benefit of French-American charities and New York's French Hospital. Society turns out for April in Paris in New York.
Down Florida way, there's a pooch with a purpose, pursuing a porpoise. Stepper's gallant Prince 2, Muggsy for short, is a well-bred Boston Terrier with a magnificent obsession, a porpoise named Splash. Smart fellow that he is, Splash keeps leading Muggsy on, round and round, discreetly out of reach. Cutting up and flying high, Splash is quick as a flash. Man to man, face to face, Muggsy's no match for Splash, and so the tuckered-out terrier retreats to the shore, proving porpoises are smarter than dogs, or something. Facing off, the Detroit Red Wings and Montreal Canadiens clash in the deciding game of the Stanley Cup playoffs, ice hockey's World Series. Detroit's defending champions put on the pressure early, but the Canadiens' defense holds and Jack Leclerc controls the puck. Suddenly, the Wings' brilliant Gordie Howe steals the disc and storms back into Montreal ice, setting up teammate Alex Delvecchio, who scores. Detroit's smooth skating sextet dominates the play, fighting to repeat last year's victory over the Canadiens in the Stanley Cup Finals. With his team leading 2-0 in the final period, the Wings' Delvecchio skates in alone to drill home his second goal. The hometown Detroit crowd sees the Canadiens come alive as Floyd Curry, to the left of the net, slaps in a loose puck. But it's too late, and when the buzzer sounds, the Red Wings have won 3-1, capturing the silver mug symbolic of world ice hockey supremacy, the coveted Stanley Cup.
At the Allied High Commission building in Vienna, Big Four diplomats, led by Llewellyn Thompson, American ambassador, shape an Austrian peace treaty. Austria's Foreign Minister, Leopold Fiegel, attends the meetings but does not take part in the discussions. Russia's Ivan Ilyachev, though grim-faced, yields to America's Thompson on several controversial points in the long-delayed pact. France's representative, Roger Lalouette, backed by the British ambassador, Sir Geoffrey Wallinger, wins Russian agreement for a sovereign, independent, and democratic Austria, a grave post-war problem near settlement. Another explosive European issue, control of the Saar, is resolved in Paris, assuring West German sovereignty. Saar Premier Johannes Hoffmann and French Foreign Minister Antoine Pinay sign an agreement binding their two economies closely, but leaving self-government to the Saarlanders. For decades a pawn in continental wars, the coal-rich Saar looks toward peace. A decade ago, Berlin was in ruins, a bomb-gutted testament to the awesome and deadly destructive might of Allied airmen. Out of the rubble, slowly and silently, Berliners have rebuilt much of their city, and the women have joined in the job of salvaging what they could from the debris. Day by day, brick by brick, they toiled with the same thoroughness that they used in housework. Though fingers and hands pained and backs ached, work went on until the job that had to be done was done. Now they can sit back as a grateful city unveils a memorial statue to perpetuate their sacrifice and service. The hands that rocked the cradle have rebuilt a giant city. Unrest flames into civil war in Saigon, South Vietnam's capital. Nationalist troops fight it out in the streets against the rebel Bean Zion army. Caught in the crossfire, panic-stricken civilians rush for shelter. On the peaceful French Riviera, 7,000 miles away, Vietnam's chief of state, Bao Dai, sits out the war, but finally agrees to be photographed. France supports Bao Dai, while in Saigon, a Congress meets to consider ousting him. Meanwhile, Saigon is a city of hysteria, fire, and death. Flames sweep a square mile of the capital. Frantic crowds mill in the streets, gripped by terror, running aimlessly anywhere to escape with their lives and their loved ones. firemen struggle against the flames while machine gun and mortar fire rips the city. The wounded are everywhere. "500 are killed in less than 2 days. Thousands of wounded fill the hospitals. An estimated 100,000 are homeless. Once a fun-loving city, Saigon crumples under the devastation of civil war.
Touring South Africa, the Most Reverend Geoffrey Francis Fisher, Archbishop of Canterbury, sees Rhodesia's beautiful Victoria Falls. The Primate of England and his wife watch the thundering cascade discovered by Livingstone, who named the falls for Queen Victoria. Mrs. Fisher photographs a rainbow over Africa's mighty Victoria Falls. A scroll is presented to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Salk of New York, parents of Dr. Jonas Salk. Mr. and Mrs. Salk are honored as Jewish Parents of the Year. They raised 3 sons as doctors, and it was the polio vaccine developed by Jonas that blesses the parenthood of Mr. and Mrs. Salk. A successful operation separates Siamese twins from Siam at the University of Chicago Medical Center. A month and a week after the operation, the twins, Napid and Prisana Paulpino, are feeling tip-top. At first, the 2-year-old girls were lonely when the bone and tissue joining them was separated, but now they've become happy individuals instead. The girls are also ready for home, but not without a thank you for Nurse, who's taking them back to Bangkok in Siam. Gold on them thar trees, green gold, a bonanza of bananas worth some $40 million yearly to the growers of Ecuador. Trees sprout so fast, banana stems are cut every 3 or 4 months. When harvested, they fall right on the workers' shoulders, an 80-pound bundle of bananas that is carried out of the jungle by donkeys, en route from tree to table. Unloaded at the plantation's distribution center, each of the stems is covered with a plastic bag to prevent bruising and scarring. Transferred to the 20th Century Limited, next stop is the river. Here, the stems are automatically counted as they're loaded onto barges. The shipment is headed for the coast and ocean-going banana boats. A conveyor belt loads 1,900 stems an hour. Green gold to make Ecuador the world's top banana. Daredevil drivers from 11 countries thunder away in Italy's World Championship Mille Miglia, toughest and richest of the continent's road races. With their eyes on the $35,000 in prizes, more than 500 drivers streak along the cross-country course, 1,000 miles and 3,000 turns. Britain's Sterling Moss is burning up the road, outdistancing the field. A surprising runaway winner, and in record time, Moss gets the checkered flag. After 1,000 miles in a little over 10 hours, 25-year-old Sterling Moss is champion of champions in the grueling Mille Miglia.
Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, is a battered city of destruction and death after 2 weeks of bloody civil war. Mortar shells punched holes in buildings through the city. But while much of Saigon is a shambles, South Vietnam's premier, Ngo Dinh Diem, Right, is victorious. His troops have decisively downed the rebels. Rebel Bean Zion soldiers put down their rifles. Their officers bring word that 5 more battalions surrender to the American-supported government of 54-year-old Ngo Dinh Diem. Thousands of angry Frenchmen in Tunis stage a noisy demonstration to protest against French-Tunisian agreements that give partial home rule to Tunisia. Speakers bitterly condemn French Resident General Pierre Boyer de la Tour. Police can't control the demonstrators. They are bound for the Resident General's headquarters. Outside the gates, the crowd shouts abuse at the Resident General. It demands the return of a home rule opposition leader he expelled. For 2 noisy hours, the hullabaloo continues. No casualties are reported, but tempers are hot in the capital of Tunisia. Dry, smiling, and debonair on his 71st birthday, former President Truman poses with Senator Symington of Missouri on the site of the Truman Memorial Library. Using a gold-plated shovel, he starts the library, a project close to his heart. Mrs. Truman also takes a stab at the good Missouri earth, and so does daughter Margaret. The library at Independence will hold historic papers covering the presidency of Harry Truman.
In historic ceremonies, West Germany completes her 10-year struggle from unconditional surrender to sovereignty. France, America, and Britain sign away their occupation rights, and West Germany is again mistress of her destiny. In his Chancery Garden in Bonn, Konrad Adenauer, the country's grand old man, emerges to make the proud announcement, "We are a free and independent state, standing free among the free, allied with the West in true partnership." The black, red, and gold flag of the Federal Republic proclaims the beginning of a new chapter in German history. At NATO headquarters in Paris, the 14 member nations meet to welcome the newly sovereign nation into the organization. America's Dulles and Britain's Macmillan are present with Francis Pinet and Belgium's Spock to hear Adenauer say that Germany has been purified of crimes committed in her name. At shape ceremonies, the German anthem is played on French soil for the first time in 11 years. General Hans Speidel and General Alfred Grunther, Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, salute a new partner who will eventually contribute 500,000 soldiers to the Atlantic Alliance. West Germany is restored at last to a place of trust in the Western world. There are still scars of the Germany of a decade ago. Devastated, demoralized, dismembered, a battered and beaten nation. Added to the misery of 50 million West Germans was the suffering of their 18 million East German countrymen under godless communism. But American financial aid, a sympathetic occupation, and the Germans' own energy have rebuilt a dynamic, prosperous nation. Thoroughfares like Taylor Street pay tribute to American military men who stayed as good Samaritans, eager to speed the recovery of a war-sick people. New apartment houses, modern airports are lasting monuments to America's role in rekindling a faith in the future for the youth who must inherit the Germany of tomorrow.
A scroll honoring President Eisenhower for activities on behalf of cerebral palsy victims is presented to the President at the White House by Jack Hausman, William Ford, Leonard Goldenson, Roger Firestone, and Joseph Martino, all of the United Cerebral Palsy Campaign. The presentation opens the 1955 campaign for $10 million to fight cerebral palsy. In London, there's a campaign underway, too, and the Duke of Edinburgh assists. Reading 4-minute miler Roger Bannister and relay star Chataway, the Duke is starting them on a 3-mile relay, carrying big checks for London's Historic Churches Preservation Fund. He suggests they better not lose their way. And there they go, sprinting through the gates of Buckingham Palace, running off with the checks. Poppies are blooming by the basketful as the American Legion starts its annual campaign for disabled veterans. John Wayne, star of Warner Brothers film The Sea Chase, arrives in costume on a Hollywood set to buy the first poppy from Mrs. Elsa Shallot and Mrs. Frida Brown of the California Legion Auxiliary. The first poppy goes in the first buttonhole on the first American Legion campaign day.
Munich, Gustav Adolf Baum squeezes himself into a torpedo-shaped contraption for an all-out assault on a series of motorcycle records. Flat on his back, with only inches between him and an asphalt hot seat, the jet-propelled German is streaking towards speeds of better than 100 miles an hour. More than 20 motorbike marks topple before the terrific torpedo. Rolling to a stop at the end of his record-breaking run, Gustav Adolf Baum steps out to claim his reward. A bouquet of flowers from, you guessed it, Mrs. Gustav Adolf Baum.
At solemn centuries-old Belvedere Castle in Vienna, Secretary of State Dulles arrives for the signing of the long-delayed Austrian peace treaty. Harold Macmillan, Britain's foreign minister, French envoy Antoine Pinay, and Soviet Russia's gruff old Molotov also file into the ornate chamber for the historic ceremonies. Molotov is first to sign the treaty which declares Austria sovereign, independent, and democratic. Dulles and the others follow, and after 17 years of German and Big Four occupation, Austrian Foreign Minister Fiegel can look forward to the withdrawal of all foreign troops within 90 days of the treaty's ratification. The Iron Curtain rolls back across neutral Austria as church bells proclaim the rebirth of freedom to a joyful people. Colorado Springs, Colorado is getting ready to welcome a new neighbor, the United States Air Force Academy. Located on the outskirts of the city, the Academy will sprawl across 17,000 acres in a picturesque mile-high valley in the Rocky Mountains. Little more than a wilderness today. In 2 years, the site should look something like this model of the ultra-modern school, shown for the first time by Air Force Secretary Talbot and Academy Superintendent Harmon. With jets for flight training, the Academy will cost an estimated $126 million and have an annual enrollment of 2,500 cadets, following in the proud traditions of West Point and Annapolis. The Air Force also shows off the Hercules, a gleaming 54-ton sky freighter with a 130-foot wingspan. America's first turboprop cargo transport, its speed tops many World War II fighter planes. Turning almost on a dime, its propellers reverse pitch for quick stops. Despite its tremendous size, the Sky Giant can take off in less than 900 feet. Hercules will airlift up to 20 tons of cargo and is designed for quick convertibility to a troop carrier or an aerial ambulance. Combining size, speed, and versatility, Hercules is a handy guy to have in the sky.
After taking office as Italy's new president, Giovanni Gronchi rides with Premier Mario Scelba through the streets of Rome. Though they are outwardly cordial, Gronchi's election has imperiled Scelba's pro-American government. Pledging a new deal for Italy and promising that he will be no figurehead, Giovanni Gronchi, beneath a sweeping jet salute, rides into the presidential palace. The nation's first family assembles for a birthday party at President Eisenhower's farm at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The presidential flag flies beneath Old Glory. Gathered on the porch are grandparents, parents, and small fry, including Julia Frances Gill, 8 months old, whose great-grandmother, Mrs. John Dowd, is 77 today. Mrs. Dowd is Mrs. Eisenhower's mother. She's the president's guest of honor, and all her descendants are gathered around. A tremendous throng jams the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires to hear President Juan Perón continue his attacks on the Catholic Church at a workers' rally on Argentina's Labor Day. Perón's attempts to separate church and state have split the country and raised fears of violent religious persecution. Despite his stormy actions, Perón urges the throng to be firm and alert, but quiet. The workers heed his plea, but unrest still smolders in uneasy Argentina. 49 of the nation's top housewives show their skill at domestic arts in the annual Mrs. America contest at Eleanor Village, Florida. Preparing dinner is one task, and it may be worth a tasty $15,000. The contest is all homemaking. For the first time, there's no bathing suit competition. The final selection is announced, and it's Mrs. Nebraska who cooked the best dinner, kept the neatest house, and has 5 children to boot. Mrs. Ramona Deitmeyer, 35, gets the crown, $15,000 in prizes, and hubby's own salute to the new Mrs. America.
Well, things weren't rough enough on the frontier, so Davy Crockett is a-visiting the St. Louis Zoo. Well, pretty dead here, too. Wonder what's doing at the Golden Nugget. Ah, the joint's jumping. Lots of strange-looking monkeys. New York-type fellers, I reckon. all winter to train these caricatures. Could do it quicker with fire water. Maybe they have. Sometimes gets a mite strenuous. Sometimes mighty strenuous. Well, got to get moseying along. 6 power-packed college shells sliced through the Potomac River in the 10th Annual Eastern Sprint Championships. Favored Pennsylvania pulls slowly ahead with Cornell second and Navy, victorious the last 3 years, third. Yale, Princeton, and Columbia trail far behind the strong and smooth Quaker crew. 10,000 persons line the banks at the finish of the 2,000-meter course as the smartly stroking Pennsylvanians sprint to victory, winning by open water over Cornell. Columbia finishes fast to take third, and Yale is fourth. Topping the cup, the 8th at rate, the men of Penn.
Freedom is dying in their homeland, but not in the hearts of the war-ravaged people of northern Indochina, fleeing Haiphong before its communist occupation. In makeshift tent cities, homeless, helpless, and hungry, they know the price of liberty is high. Their future, if they are to have any, will be built with food and funds, tools and trades made possible by the contributions of Americans to the Operation Brotherhood campaign. In Haiphong Harbor, after dusting with DDT the last of 800,000 refugees, board Navy ships for the journey south to Saigon and a new life. Rioting crowds protesting in order to remain indoors until the communists enter clash with French troops, a violent ending to 92 years of colonial rule in Indochina. By choice, they will remain behind the bamboo curtain. Red posters and flags, Russian-built trucks, lines of frozen-faced conquerors sound freedom's passing in Haiphong. At his press conference, President Eisenhower discusses the proposed four-power meeting with Russia. The president, after promising an intensive, vigilant search for peace, is asked,
There have been some people in Congress, including members of your own party, who appear to take the position that even to go to such a conference is an act of appeasement. And I wondered if you felt that that attitude was really not expressive of the American people today.
I don't believe it for a minute. May I be personal? I have met with these people through months, and there's no appeasement in my heart that I know about. I am not ready, as I understand appeasement is selling out rights or other people to gain some fancied immediate end of your own. And I just can't believe that America in general either wants it, or I believe that they suspect that their government in general is apt to fall into that trap.
In the Italian village of Gubbio, pomp and pageantry herald a quaint, centuries-old custom. The waxlight race commemorates a time of medieval warfare when the villagers were forced to flee their homes. After the enemy had been driven out, the people found the village gates shut and had to break them down with their own war machines. The heavy wax lights symbolize the war machines and are carried to the tomb of St. Ubaldo, the village protector. The strongest team, in theory, always arrives first, leading the people of Gubbio in their tribute to St. Ubaldo.
In London's Wembley Stadium, evangelist Billy Graham starts a new religious crusade, with crowds of Londoners attending. London newspapers, however, sharply criticize Billy, charging him with sensational evangelism and crudeness and bigotry. Billy met and overcame similar criticism in London a year ago. About 70,000 Britons hear Billy's opening sermon, and 3,000 answer his call to religion. Baudouin I, 25-year-old king of the Belgians, bids goodbye to the royal family at Brussels upon leaving for the Belgian Congo. Ex-King Leopold is among those seeing Baudouin off on the month-long tour. The junior members of the family are out too. Last goodbyes are waved as Baudouin takes off for his first trip to Belgium's huge colony in the Congo. Film actress Dorothy Malone turns Poppy Girl for the Veterans of Foreign Wars, starting the annual nationwide sale of Buddy Poppies. Dorothy, who stars in Warner Brothers' Battle Cry, receives contributions in the drive to honor the dead by helping the living. Meet Corporal Fox, an American GI who keeps in trim in Berlin with his chin. In fact, he'll balance almost anything, as this unsuspecting bike rider is going to find out. Leading with the chin is not recommended for boxers, but for Fox, it's the way to fame and perhaps fortune. He's been a hit in GI shows. Fox is strong for practice, takes along his homework when he goes for a swim. Proving he's not tired, he balances a heavy lifeguard's chair. Some places they nail down the furniture when they see Corporal Fox of Berlin coming in with his chin.
Surrounded by newsmen after his bruising ninth-round technical knockout of Don Cockell, heavyweight champion Rocky Marciano is unmarked as he praises the Britisher as one of the toughest men I've ever fought. Defeated but not disgraced, Cockell stood up to the slashing, flashing fury of Marciano's fists for 8 rounds. Battered and bleeding from a small but deep cut on his forehead, he was still on his feet when the referee stopped the one-sided struggle. Durable Don Cockell is hailed as a champion of courage, but the champion of the world is still Rocky Marciano. In London, the Royal Windsor Horse Show provides a perfect family outing for the royal family. But it's so exciting for Princess Anne that she has trouble keeping bundled up, and Dad, the Duke of Edinburgh, must tuck the little tyke in. The princess' own pony, William, is in the show, so before he goes by, Philip makes certain Anne is within restraining distance. Although William can do no better than 5th place in the blue ribbon competition, he gets loyal support from his mistress. The Queen herself presents the prizes to the winning ponies and their proud riders, adding a royal flourish to the finish of a royal horse show. Waiting for a test run on the Indianapolis Speedway is a jet-propelled car that from a standing start streaks up to 140 miles an hour in 5 seconds. Its engine is started electrically. Then the fuel jets are opened and swoosh, away she goes. The jet fuel in the engine, no bigger than a bread box, shoots power into the rear axle instead of out of the exhaust as in jet aircraft. For flying starts, here's real get up and go.